actually. Do you think it is?
Oh man, I just think how stupid, how inappropriate. I mean, if you turned the tables and you had, if you think back to when, look, just going down trying to rationalise it is absolutely thing.
Okay.
Obviously, it's wrong on every level and it's ridiculous in a sense.
We talked to a couple of actresses today who said this is topical because there's a big intimacy workshop coming up in New Zealand exploring these sorts of issues with intimate relationships in the theatre or among a cast of actors. Kaz, what's your view?
Well, there is a big issue in the whole acting world, isn't there? If you think of #MeToo and people's understanding of what is appropriate and what is not is different and has clearly changed. And it seems to me that Geoffrey Rush doesn't get what he's done. And I think whether he wins or loses the defamation case, he looks foolish, and he's going to come out of it like a dirty old man. But also,
do you think?
I think so, because he's 30 years
mistaken.
older than this. Well, some of the stuff that he's done, to my mind, is inappropriate. It's not dangerous, but it is inappropriate. And if I was the woman who was acting with him in an intimate role, I would feel uncomfortable.
And if you swap the genders and did a mind exercise in that way, it would still be inappropriate. And it'd be perhaps too many males. It would be even more inappropriate.
Point. Yeah, okay. Is it okay? I just want to ask you one other thing. In terms of straight language, is it okay for an older man to say to a younger woman in a workplace, even a theatrical workplace, you're looking very scrumptious today, which was one of the examples? Is that also... The age of that has gone as well.
I think it has. The old Sean Connery movies, the James Bond and things like that, they're in cringe kind of territory this day. The culture surely has moved a long way from that.
And Cass, you agree with that?
It must be difficult, though. Like, I'm female, you guys are the males. It must be really difficult to know what to say sometimes. And I think that is inappropriate, but it's quite a change.
I'm not sure Selwyn and I would ever say that.
No, well, you probably wouldn't.
Thank you. Something else to ask you about before we go, and not the whole e-scooter discussion again, heaven forbid, but Christine Fletcher, the former Auckland mayor who came within a hair's breadth yesterday of being knocked over by a Lime e-scooter, wants them, I see her quoted, to go on footpaths at no more than 5 kilometres an hour. Can you imagine the uptake of a disruptive transport technology that reaches the speed of 5 kilometres an hour?
An industry killed overnight, yeah.
Lime scooters will now hold a rider safety summit. I see that Lime scooters are offering free rides to the polls in the US midterms on their scooters. The lime is sour, says the Standard. This is a fad. This is this year's finger spinner. Do you think they're here to stay, or do you think they're here to fairly soon go?
Well, if you look over across to the United States and San Francisco, apparently they've got a huge issue, and they're actually looking at how they can regulate to address this. So there's a few that have actually got saturation point to tipping point from the point of view of having to go into regulation. New Zealand's lucky that it's lagging in this way and can do something perhaps on their merits.
All right, thank you.
I think there's going to be heaps more of them with the petrol prices the way they are. Everyone's going to be on them. But what I'd like to do is challenge a New Zealander to come up with actually their own innovative kind of e-scooter that we could get Harry and Megan to come try out the next time they come to visit. But that actually has a couple of modes, so that if you can go really fast on a cycle track or whatever. But
I've got to just cut you short because we're off. Kaz Carter, Selwyn Manning on the panel. Thank you both for your company. We'll see you Monday, everybody.
Thanks.
Ki te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, one teacher, 40 students. We're inside a school where 2 classes became one after a relief teacher couldn't be found today. It comes as primary teachers vote to walk off the job next month during a week of rolling strikes. Also tonight, home care support workers say rising fuel costs and a lack of guaranteed hours will force many to quit the industry. Year 13 Mount Albert Grammar students protest being banned from their last day of school, and a mail processing centre in Florida becomes the focus of the investigation into a series of pipe bomb packages.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. An investigation is underway into an exploding gas barbecue bottle at De La Salle College in Auckland, which injured several students and teachers. The principal, Miles Hogarty, says a small gas canister blew during a sausage sizzle run by students. Mr Hogarty says the students and staff were treated by the Mangere College's medical staff before ambulances arrived.
College pastoral care team have responded quickly to support the young men who have been injured and any other concerned students as well. College staff have accompanied all the students across to Middlemore, and they will remain with the young men until their parents arrive at the hospitals.
The principal of De La Salle College, Miles Hogarty. Middlemore Hospital says the 3 students and 2 teachers are stable, but one may have to be admitted. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, has again told teachers that while he understands their frustrations over pay and conditions, the government has to balance a lot of competing interests. The union and the Education Ministry are due to begin urgent bargaining with the Employment Relations Authority tomorrow in an attempt to avert next month's strike action. Mr Hipkins says he knows teachers want a lot more as soon as possible.
Government has to balance all of the things up. We've got to make sure that we're delivering things in a sustainable way. One of the things that teachers are asking for example, is more teachers. And it's difficult to deliver more teachers when we're struggling to fill the teaching positions that we've got now.
Chris Hipkins. The Prime Minister won't say which of the 3 proposed models for decriminalising abortion she prefers. The Law Commission today submitted a paper to the government which puts forward 3 options for reform. They include no mental health assessment, just 1 health practitioner making this assessment instead of 2, or requiring the test only after 22 weeks of pregnancy. Jacinda Ardern won't say which she prefers.
For now, what I'm interested in hearing is from the other MPs how they'd like us to continue this work on together. These traditionally have been matters of a conscience vote, and so I think it is important that we let those MPs feed into this process as well.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. The police say a man lay in wait overnight at a woman's home for her to return before killing her. A 55-year-old man has pleaded guilty at the High Court in Christchurch to murdering Nicole Tuxford in April this year. Conan Young reports.
The 27-year-old's body was found in her Merivale home on the morning of her murder. Detective Inspector Daryl Sweeney says her killer, who has name suppression, broke into her home and waited overnight for her to return before murdering her. He says the man was pulled over at a police checkpoint and found to be over the legal alcohol limit the night before the killing and had his car keys taken from him. Mr Sweeney says the man caught a taxi from the checkpoint and headed straight for Miss Tuxford's home. He says the police at the checkpoint have been deeply affected by the knowledge the man they pulled over went on to kill somebody, but there's no way they could have known what he was about to do. Kei Ototahi ko Conan Young tēnei.
More than 100 Year 13 Mount Albert Grammar students marched to their school this afternoon claiming they were banned from their last day to avoid pranks. In an email to parents last night, the school said Year 13 students have been granted study leave today. The principal, Patrick Drum, says the decision wasn't made to avoid pranks, but students disagree and stormed on to the school grounds in protest. Hannah Zauluwe says the school's decision upset many of her classmates.
Lots of people were very upset. I know quite a few people were crying. There was a lot of anger as well. People were very mad about it.
Mount Albert Grammar student Hannah Zwale. A woman living in Mangere who spends $200 a week on petrol taking her grandchildren to school in Manurewa is one of thousands of people boycotting fuel stations today. Nearly 40,000 people have responded to a nationwide Facebook event about boycotting all petrol stations for a day because of their high fuel prices. And Tahi Tahi lives with her 11 grandchildren, and doing the school run takes its toll on the fuel gauge.
Drop off, 1, 2, 3, 4 different schools, drop off at the 4 different schools down there, and then come back out here, do housework, do what you need, do my online stuff, and then back in the afternoon.
And Tahi Tahi says the family has been struggling since the regional fuel tax was implemented in Auckland. It's 5 past 5. Sport coach Steve Hansen has dismissed suggestions the All Blacks have lost respect for the beleaguered Wallabies ahead of Saturday's final Bledisloe Cup clash in Japan. Even after 16 straight years of Bledisloe dominance, Hansen maintains the All Blacks never tire of beating the Wallabies and never underestimate them. Still smarting from last year's dead rubber loss in Brisbane, Hansen says the All Blacks are eyeing revenge. Meanwhile, the Otago wing, Jonah Nareki, says the side's desperate to win promotion to the Premiership competition, though he hopes he doesn't have to endure another eye-watering injury. Nareki had to play on with a badly injured testicle in Otago's Franfurly Shield win over Waikato a few weeks ago, and the two sides meet again tonight in their second-tier championship final in Hamilton.
It's a big opportunity to make it to the Premiership. I guess we've been in the Championship for like 6 to 7 years, so being able to have the opportunity to make it another step forward is probably an opportunity that we have to take.
The match kicks off at 7:35 tonight. Scotsman Tom Sermani is the new coach of the Football Ferns, tasked with restoring confidence after a turbulent year off the field for New Zealand football. Sermani most recently coached the Orlando Pride in the US and has also coached the Australian and US national women's teams. He replaces Austrian Andreas Heraf, who stepped down in July after complaints of bullying. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Kiwi musos sing Dylan for Friday Night Live. Country Life samples smoothies made from kawakama, kumara and puha. Now that's got to be good for you. Now something for the weekend is an Effluent Expo at Hamilton's Mystery Creek. You heard right, Effluent Expo, not Expo, though it probably is by now. And we head west for this week's Sonic Tonic. So join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Fine spells and isolated showers. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumaranui, Taihape and Wairarapa. Fine spells today, rain developing tomorrow morning or afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods with scattered rain developing in Hawke's Bay tomorrow night. For Nelson and Marlborough, fine spells, a period of rain tomorrow afternoon. Canterbury, mainly fine, but areas of low cloud about the coast tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and isolated showers, rain in Fiordland tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine spells today with scattered showers this afternoon and evening. Cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain. And for the Chatham Islands, showers today becoming fine tomorrow. It's 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. And coming up, as primary school teachers vote to strike, we're inside a school which couldn't find a relief teacher today. But we begin with exploitation, illegal rostering and wage theft. Just some of the allegations coming from home care support workers across New Zealand. Tonight, those workers are calling on the government to hold employers to account. They say settlements were supposed to help create a workforce where the majority of workers had guaranteed hours and a wage. But instead they say their payments are their hours are erratic and rising fuel prices will force many to quit. Indira Stewart and cameraman Dan Cook investigate an industry in crisis.
It's 6 a.m. and Samoan support worker Etevise Ioane is already out preparing for her first client of the day. It's a long day ahead, and while she has some gaps in between clients, it'll be 13 hours until she returns home at the end of her workday. She works in Counties Manukau, an area with a big Pacifica population.
I really enjoy it because it's like looking after my own parents or grandparents.
Etevise began her career as a support worker after spending 30 years working as a missionary nurse overseas. And while she loves the job, she says it's been both challenging and stressful.
A lot of hours have been cut or change of agreements and guaranteed hours. I know that we're supposed to be paid extra hours on top of guaranteed hours if we work outside of our country, guaranteed hours, but sometimes that has not been the case.
Like many across the sector, Etevise and her co-workers have had continued cuts to their working hours. A guaranteed hours settlement, which came into effect in April last year, provides fixed hours over selected days and times agreed to by a support worker and their employer. It's supposed to help stabilise Etivise's income, but it hasn't.
It impacts us a lot because that means that because we still have our bills to pay.
Other workers are echoing her claims.
I haven't had an experience of having a wage that is the same all the time. It's been going up and down, and I've had my guaranteed hours cut twice.
I've been with my employer 12 months, and only just in the past 6 weeks have I been offered guaranteed hours, and those hours were only 4.
That's 2 of several workers who feature in this story but can't be identified because they're afraid they might lose their jobs. Some of them are gagged by clauses in their employment contracts, but Checkpoint can reveal they work across 4 of the major providers in the sector. On top of unstable employment hours, they also say the current travel rates they receive aren't enough.
This is the route I take in the morning because I cannot go on the motorway. There's no way I can get on the motorway now.
On a normal workday, Etivise will be paid for her travel in between each client.
Most of the times it's very busy, and we just finished all the road works here on this area, so that has also been a real delay for us.
According to the settlement, she'll get a flat rate of $4.19 for any distance she travels under 15 kilometres. If her next client is more than 15 kilometres away, she'll be paid the minimum wage of $16.50 an hour for her travel time and a mileage rate of 50 cents a kilometre.
We use our own cars, and we are also encouraged to make sure we have insurance, because we take clients to do their shopping, and we take them out to other appointments.
So if Etivise travels 1 kilometre to her next client, she'll receive $4.19. If she travels 14 kilometres, she'll still receive that flat rate of $4.19. Workers say that system forces them to pay out of their own pockets each week just to do their job.
It's not enough. I, on a Wednesday, do 54.2k, but I only get paid 33.3k. So I'm subsidising 20.9k out of my own pocket.
I had one job that was done on my car at 32 k's there and back, and they refused to pay that.
I did have a client, and the cares I had to do for that client, it racked up 70k, and then they didn't pay me for it.
For Etivise, that mileage rate just isn't enough.
I just had my car service. It took me, I think I rang the AA 10 times in a month because I had a faulty battery, but I couldn't afford, so it was very stressful for me. Every time I go to start the car, I pray that it goes.
Since the travel rate was put in place, around the country the average price of petrol per litre has gone up 36%, from $1.77 in October 2016 to $2.41. And despite 2 government reviews during that time, the travel rates haven't budged.
Sometimes it's a real struggle to go to work when they can't afford the petrol. But yeah, it's put a stress on all of us.
Other workers share similar stories.
A third of my wage would go to running my vehicle. There's been times where I haven't had any petrol in my car, and I've had clients that I need to go and service, and I don't know how I'm going to get to them. There have been times when that's happened. I've had times when I've been on the job and I've had to ring one of my fellow support workers to come and pick me up because I'm on the side of the road and I've run out of petrol. That's happened twice.
South Canterbury support worker Jenny agrees.
We are subsidising the service. We're paying more. It's not enough, and we're all struggling, and there's people leaving this profession. They cannot afford to do this.
Workers are also frustrated over being constantly underpaid. Jenny reads anonymous comments from other workers who are fed up.
Why are people having to struggle and stress for so long about unpaid income? What other industry gets away with breaking government legislation and acts? The stress level gets pretty high. We as support workers are not supposed to have a brain to work out we've been short paid.
32 weeks straight, every single week I had to email them, follow up with phone calls, and every single email I had to attach it to the union because they just were ignoring me and they were not paying what they had owed me. And I eventually had to attention it to the CEO of the company, and only then did I get a response.
Every week we're fighting for our pay. It never used to be like that.
Look, honestly, if you get a pay slip that's accurate, you actually are quite surprised.
Many workers say they've written to the Health Minister, David Clark, calling for a review. Now some are filing personal grievance claims to the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, with several collectives of support workers preparing to file class action lawsuits against their employers.
In April last year, the government announced a $2 billion pay equity settlement for this industry. Enliven is just one of many providers who were represented in those negotiations. That settlement redressed past undervaluation of care and support work and was just one of the stepping stones towards creating regularised jobs for about 55,000 workers.
So all of our workers, the workers that are employed on as permanent employees, absolutely have guaranteed hours.
That's Andrea McLeod, the General Manager for Enliven, Etivise's employer, explaining how they implement guaranteed hours. According to the settlement, even if a provider can't fill your guaranteed hours with work, you must still be paid for your guaranteed hours. If, after a week of consultation, they can't fill your hours, you'll receive 2 weeks' notice before your hours get reduced.
So we enter into a consultation period and we give 2 weeks' notice. So during that time we pay their guaranteed hours. We work really hard to see if we can fill them, but there are times where we can't do that.
Until there's been an agreed change to the guaranteed hours.
We continue to pay it.
You continue to pay
even if we can't fill it.
But if within 3 weeks you can't, then the guaranteed hours...
They might reduce. Yeah.
And,
and they go up. They also go up, yeah.
When they've got guaranteed hours and then they work additional hours, are you paying the additional hours or
yeah,
with all your workers?
Yep.
We asked these questions because many of Enliven's workers say that's not true. And a comparison of their pay slips against the rosters they've worked over the past several months support their statements.
There's a few challenges around how we invoice for those cancelled visits and guaranteed hours top-ups, but that's an issue that Enliven is working on in the background again. That doesn't affect how the Enliven support worker gets paid.
Ms McLeod says providers are grappling with the changes they've had to implement in the last 3 years. So is it sustainable?
It's challenging. There are providers who are considering whether they can continue.
And is the government listening?
That's a challenging question. I'd like to be positive to say, yes, it feels like we're starting to be heard.
Since the travel rates were put in place by the government committed to reviewing them every year. But despite 2 reviews so far, they decided that no changes would be made. Etu spokesperson Kirsty McCulley says the industry is at a critical point.
I'd say we're getting to a critical level of frustration that is felt by home support workers across the country. We have daily instances of people reporting their frustration and talking about leaving the sector.
It's a workforce that she says is dominated by women, a significant portion of which are Māori and Pacific, as well as increasing numbers of migrant workers. Due to an ageing population, government figures show the demand for workers in this industry is expected to increase by between 50 and 75% in the next 8 years.
We know that the government's intending to do work on the regularisation of the workforce, but those steps need to be taken immediately. Otherwise, we're going to potentially lose a lot of well-trained, highly skilled home support workers from the workforce at a time when we can't afford it.
Jenny says workers are desperate for the government to act and makes her plea to the Prime Minister.
Jacinda, please, I really want you to take this on board and fix this sector. It touches everybody. It's your parents, it's your brothers, your sisters, it's my family, it's my loved ones, it's me and my future. We need to make sure the service works and works well.
Mo te hōtaka o te ahipone, ko Indira Stewart aho.
And this afternoon, our reporter Matthew Tunison asked the Prime Minister what she had to say to home care workers who are struggling with irregular hours and rising fuel costs.
Of course, we're doing all we can to ensure that we've got wages in New Zealand that meet the cost of living. When we came in, we focused on, for instance, making sure that the home care workers deal spread over to those working in mental health. We've worked on pay equity. We settled an agreement with the nurses that would lift their wages. We know that wages are an issue across the board in New Zealand, and that it, particularly with high house prices in Auckland, that has there is an impact there.
Any moves to increase the travel allowances for home care workers?
Some of those are things that are negotiated, obviously, within individual industries and areas of work. We know, though, that things like probably the biggest cost of living comes around housing costs. That's why, for instance, we're doing the work we are on Kiwi Build. We need to increase supply to try and bring some of those costs down.
And primary teachers will walk out of classes next month during a week of rolling strikes after rejecting a 9.3% pay rise over 3 years. Their union says the pay is too low to attract and keep teachers, and class sizes and workloads are too high. Today at Auckland's Gladstone Primary, a bad case of laryngitis left them a teacher short, with apparently not a relief teacher to be found anywhere in the city. Now that meant that Carly Oliveira, Mrs O to her students, was left to corral 2 full classes of kids rather than the usual one. Mrs O's 5 and 6-year-olds are great with numbers.
1, 2.
They need to be, because there's a few extra students on the mat today.
Okay, we're going to call the roll. Remember, this takes a little while because we've got to do 2 today.
Roll call rolls on.
Kia ora, Chanel.
And on.
Kia ora, Mrs O. Kia ora, Emily. Good morning, Mrs O.
And on.
Kia ora, Arlo. Kia ora, Mrs O. Emily, bottom.
And on.
Good afternoon, Ruby. Good afternoon, Mrs O. Good afternoon, Ethan. Oh, Ethan's outside. Good afternoon, Nico.
There are 40 here today, and the reason being is my colleague who I usually co-teach with, she's sick with laryngitis today, and we couldn't get a reliever, so it's me.
No relief teacher?
No, we've got a few in the school at the moment that were already pre-booked, but we tried everything to find someone, but no one took the job. So instead of splitting the class amongst my team, which is the other option, so they would get 5 or 6 children each, we just decided that it was better for the children to not split the class, and we just all being a little bit flexible around here and making it work.
Checkpoint gets to work verifying the numbers.
18, 19.
So how many people in Mrs O's class today? 20?
No.
30?
No. Usually around 24.
So from 24 to 40?
Yeah, it's a bit of a workload.
Is that stressful?
It's a big job, that's for sure, wrangling them and making sure that you've got everybody and, you know, ticking off in your head who's here and who's not. And obviously our programs are very different on a day like today. You know, you can't do your traditional reading, writing and maths because there's just too many kids.
So you couldn't get to them all in the same way you would normally?
Oh, absolutely not, no.
So to be honest, how much quality time are your 40 students getting today?
They're getting quality time with me, but they might not be getting quality teaching because of the numbers. I mean, I would hate to think that if this teaching crisis continues, that might become a sad reality within our classrooms every day, all day. Imagine that. It would just be, I wouldn't even want to think about it.
So you can't teach your normal program because of the sheer numbers. So what do you do instead?
So we're being really flexible and thinking outside the box. So today we did a little bit of dancing. We had assembly first off in the hall, so that was great. Did a little bit of dancing, so playing on the arts, and then instead of doing a traditional writing lesson, we did some phonics and some poetry together, and all the children did that together. We did it actually with 3 classes, so there were 2 teachers between 60, I think we had 64 or 65 children. So, you know, you've got a child that might say your name 50 times before it's 10 o'clock. You might have children that need you because they're sad that they've left their mum. So you've got one on your knee, you're trying to do the role.
Mrs O has voted to strike next month.
Obviously, with trepidation, none of us have voted in a way that we just want more money, or it's not a flippant thing that we're dealing with at the moment. It's a really big issue. I don't want to inconvenience my parents. I don't want to inconvenience the community, but once again, I've got to step back and look at the big picture. I need to stand up, and we need to stand up for our profession. I've been teaching nearly 20 years, and I would hate to think that if this crisis continues, that I might not actually have the will to do my job, and that would break my heart. I love my job, and I know many teachers are in the same boat, and we're all passionate and we're all hardworking. We know all of those things, but we've got to look at the bigger picture. We've got to look at the future of our profession, and that's what this campaign's all about.
If you're wondering, I talked to Mrs. O during her lunch break, and Checkpoint can confirm there were indeed
40
5- and 6-year-olds under Mrs. O's watch this Friday. Last-minute preparations are well underway ahead of the much-anticipated arrival of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex this weekend. The royal couple will touch down in Wellington on Sunday for the 5-day visit, and includes trips to parts of Wellington, Rotorua, Auckland and Abel, Tasman. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will also be hosted by the Governor-General at Parliament House in Wellington. And to feed the Duke and Duchess, as well as the hundreds of people that will accompany them, requires a royal effort by the kitchen staff. Our recently seconded royal reporter Logan Church went to Government House this afternoon to see how the preparations are coming along.
There's obviously eggs to peel, there's preparations to make, and things to chop, and all sorts of things. So I've got a team arriving, and then there'll be about 10 of us on the Sunday in preparation for that.
That's Government House head chef Simon Peacock. He and his team are busy steaming crayfish, prepping beef, shucking pawa. The to-do list is never-ending. This isn't the first time Simon's cooked for Prince Harry.
I've catered for Harry himself, or the Duke of Sussex. He just came here on, it wasn't that official visit, but he just came here by himself with his people. It was a very casual, low-key. I think it was an early dinner before he went to the rugby. So we just... I remember him commenting on the Yorkshire puddings. He was surprised that he'd come all the way to the other side of the world and there were still Yorkshire puddings available for him. So he was pretty happy about that.
The 3-strong kitchen crew in today are now working to prepare canapes ahead of a 150-person reception on Sunday to celebrate the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage in New Zealand.
That'll just be a finger food canapé style type thing, but we've just got on there a bit of a showcase of some of the New Zealand products. We've just got some crayfish that have just beeped in the corner there, so we're going to turn those into little arancini balls, so some lovely fresh crayfish there. Briar's over in the corner, she's just shucking a little farmed cocktail pawa that will be turning into a dumpling, probably serving them in the pawa shell just to showcase that a little bit. We've braised some lamb, more of the Cadrona Merino lamb we've got over there. Just a bit of a showcase of New Zealand's finest, really.
Despite the Duchess being 4 months pregnant, there weren't any specific food requests.
They haven't come with any pre-list or anything like that. They're relatively low maintenance as far as I'm concerned at this stage. But it's a matter of, I've just got to be ready. It's one of those things that as soon as they land, they're obviously at the end of quite a big tour. They'll be pretty tired, I'd imagine, and I just have to get myself into a position to say, right, what do you feel like eating? Because I can supply that for you.
It's not just the kitchen that's been busy. The whole house is undergoing last-minute prep.
So here is the Taupapai entry, where all of our guests will be received, and as they arrive, and they'll be welcomed into the house, and through here and led through to our ballroom, where we'll be hosting them for the reception for the evening.
A white marquee runs right through the lawn, outside the front door, where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will be welcomed into the house by the Governor-General. Organising such an event is challenging by any standards. It requires the kitchen and dozens of waiting staff to work together in perfect unison. But for Simon, there is nothing else he'd rather be doing.
I've never worked anywhere else for about 9 years, and it's hard for me to think about doing anything else.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will arrive in Wellington on Sunday. In Wellington for Checkpoint, call Logan Church, Chennai.
Coming up, a mail processing centre in Florida becomes the focus of the investigation into a series of pipe bomb packages. Year 13 Mount Albert grammar students protest being banned from their last day of school. And a year after the election, we travel the country to ask people what they think the government's mental health inquiry will achieve. And don't forget, we would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@radionewzealand.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
An investigation is underway into an exploding gas barbecue bottle at De La Salle College in Auckland, which injured several students and teachers. The principal, Miles Hogarty, says a small gas canister blew during a sausage sizzle that was being rung by students as part of their Young Enterprise study. A 55-year-old man who laid in wait for his victim has pleaded guilty to murdering 27-year-old Nicole Tuxford at her Maryvale home in April. Detective Inspector Daryl Sweeney says her killer, who has name suppression, broke into her home and waited overnight for her to return before murdering her. He says the man was pulled over at a police checkpoint and found to be over the legal alcohol limit just hours before the killing and had lost his car keys and had his car keys taken from him. But the man caught a taxi from the checkpoint and headed straight for Ms. Tuxford's home. He said officers at the checkpoint have been deeply troubled by the knowledge the man they pulled over went on to kill, but there's no way they could have known what he was about to do. The Justice Minister Andrew Little expects opposition to the Law Commission's proposed changes to decriminalising abortion. The three health models recommended including no mental health assessment, just one health practitioner making this assessment instead of two, or requiring the test only after 22 weeks of pregnancy. Mr Little will take a paper to Cabinet next year to consult government partners before drafting a bill. His preference is for a medical assessment in later stage abortions. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, won't say which option she prefers. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, has again told teachers that while he understands their frustrations over pay and conditions, the government has to balance a lot of competing interests. The union and the Education Ministry are due to begin urgent bargaining with the Employment Relations Authority tomorrow in an attempt to avert next month's strike action. More than 100 Year 13 Mount Albert grammar students who claimed they were banned on their last day to avoid pranks objected and stormed the school grounds in protest. The school says the decision to grant study leave wasn't made to avoid hijinks. That's the news. I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Katrina. And Nona Peltier joins me in the studio now to talk all things business. So this company, TIL Logistics, they're a freight company, aren't
they?
That's
right, they're a big one too.
Yeah, they're teaming up with New Plymouth Hirangi Energy to use hydro fuel technology to add that to their fleet. So how long is it going to take to make that happen?
Well, they expect to have their first pilot vehicles on the road by 2020, which doesn't seem that far away when you think this is a hydrogen fuel technology where you basically separate water from oxygen and then fuel your vehicles. It's all very scientific and technical, and they're doing it in Europe. So they're pretty sure they can do it here. The one thing that they're going to have to do, though, is create the infrastructure. So that's the fueling stations and the vehicles that would use this type of technology. So basically, we're talking about heavy vehicles. These are like forklifts, trucks on the road, that sort of thing. And these vehicles will have to have special technology, and it will replace diesel, so reduce the carbon footprint of TIL, and that's why they're getting into it.
So they want to do it with the entire fleet?
Yes. They want to be able to do that with all heavy vehicles eventually in New Zealand. So what we're going to do is get rid of, say, petrol vehicles with electric vehicles, and we'll get rid of diesel trucks with hydrogen technology.
It's quite ironic because I think they freight fuel in tankers.
All sorts of things. Yes,
yeah.
Well, the world's a changing place. That's all you can say about that.
How big a player are they?
Well, they're fairly large. They've got 900 trucks. They've got forklifts. They've just recently bought another company, a specialist company that's got heavy-duty equipment, so the sort of thing that you would use to move a wind farm, or rather, I guess, a windmill, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So they're leading the charge.
Oh, yeah. they're leading the charge, and they're all for it. They just recently listed on the market not so long ago, and they're looking to become a much bigger player in New Zealand.
So speaking of the market, any drama again today?
Oh yes, I love a day like this, because this is a day where we can really say the market went on a roller coaster ride. So it came, after yesterday, Wall Street sort of rebounded a bit with Microsoft's result, which was, good, back to business as usual perhaps. So Wall Street rallied, and then our market opened and it rallied, and we went up to just where we finished off yesterday, 0.9% rise. So tick, 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 all the way up to 0.9%. You'd think that was good, but boom, where did they end off the day? Just where they started. Real roller coaster.
Only woman who can make the markets sound like a soap opera, Mona. Where did the dollar, where is our dollar sitting at the moment?
Dollar, actually, it's a bit weaker, and that's partly because of people taking positions with the US dollar against some GDP figures that are coming out overnight in the United States, which will determine the direction of interest rates there. So we slipped below 65 cents to 64.8 US cents, 92.1 Australian, so we're holding steady there, and 50.7 pence.
Thanks, Nona Peltier, for joining us with all the business news that you need to know today. And a mail processing centre in Florida has today become the focus of an investigation into the series of pipe bomb packages targeting high-profile Democrats and critics of President Donald Trump. A total of 10 potentially explosive parcels have now been intercepted, and the latest one was sent to the former Vice President Joe Biden. The actor Robert De Niro also got one of these packages. Investigators are intensifying their efforts to find whoever is behind them and have warned that there could be more. Here's the BBC's Nick Bryant.
The scenes that America woke up to. What looked like old footage from the war in Iraq, but which were real-time images from a postal facility in Delaware. A bomb disposal expert examining a suspect package addressed to the former Vice President Joe Biden. Yet another prominent Democrat sent a crude bomb. In the middle of the night, Lower Manhattan became the focus, and a package sent to the office in Tribeca of the movie star Robert De Niro, an outspoken critic of Donald Trump. Once again, a suspect's explosive device hauled safely away in a vehicle that's fast becoming a familiar sight, the bomb squad's total containment vessel.
We are treating them as live devices. As you see the way our bomb squad detectives went into CNN yesterday, this has to be taken with the utmost seriousness. So as far as a hoax device, we're not treating it that way.
At a campaign rally last night, Donald Trump said acts of political violence were an attack on democracy. But some of his strongest remarks were directed at journalists.
As part of a larger national effort to bridge our divides and bring people together, the media also has a responsibility to set a civil tone and to stop the endless hostility and constant negative and oftentimes false attacks and stories. Have to do it. Have to do it.
The president accepted no personal blame for his part in the coarsening of American public life. And this morning on Twitter, he renewed his attack on the media. A very big part of the anger we see today in our society is caused by the purposely false and inaccurate reporting of the mainstream media that I refer to as fake news. That got this response from the former CIA director, John Brennan, who was sent an explosive package. Stop blaming others. Look in the mirror. Your inflammatory rhetoric, insults, lies, and encouragement of physical violence are disgraceful. Clean up your act. Because none of the devices have exploded, the FBI has a mound of forensic evidence to help track down who's responsible. But some prominent conservatives have claimed this is all a liberal hoax, timed to coincide with crucial congressional elections. The focus of the investigation right now is South Florida, where some of the parcels were put in the post. And it's worth stressing again just how politicized this moment has become. We haven't seen a nation coming together. We are watching once again as America tears itself apart.
And that was Nick Bryant in New York. And as part of our 1 Year On series, reporter Max Toll and cameraman Luke McPake have driven the length of the country to gauge what impact the coalition government is having on people's lives. In this latest episode of their series, Beyond the Beehive, they visit Hastings and Invercargill to ask what people hope the government's mental health inquiry will achieve.
In Hastings, Zach Markore works in suicide prevention. He runs the Te Tai Timu Trust, which organises events for rangatahi on the East Coast. Zach was inspired to set up the trust after his teenage son Kelly took his life 18 years ago today.
My wife and I were freezer workers. We didn't have the knowledge to understand what pain looked like. So in 2007 we decided we would open up a trust. A Tai Timu Trust, and that was really to develop our capacity as a whānau to support others.
Zach's Te Tai Timu Trust encourages rangatahi to be open about their feelings.
Some of the issues I think is really about us being able to teach our kids how to deal with their emotions. In the old days, 30 years ago, it was the old story, harden up, move on. We're not teaching them how to deal with their emotions. I know one of those. I know that person, I was that person. But, if I was coached on how to deal with things like anger and violence, I probably wouldn't have been that person.
The government says it will spend hundreds of millions of dollars on mental health services and has already expanded a program that places mental health nurses in high schools and launched a pilot to make mental health care free for 18 to 25-year-olds. Other than that, little new money has been committed yet. Instead, the government is waiting on the results of its mental health inquiry, which has been running all year. It's a major focus because New Zealand has one of the highest suicide rates in the developed world. Zach says it doesn't have to be that way.
Just rocking up and say, well, here's a prescription, go away, this will help. You've got to have more of a personal approach, Yeah, I think it's in culture. It's a cultural thing for us. Kiwis, Māori, Kiwis, the harden up scenario. We talk really well about how we play a rugby game. A few beers. We've scored 3 tries now. And there's so many more people dropped off the tackles that they tried to make on us. So we talk about how well we do things, but we don't really talk about things that aren't going well in our lives. If we could talk about our triumphs, that's awesome. But if we could teach our kids and our families how to talk about the burdens in life, that would really, really help.
Southlanders have a reputation for being deeply stoic. We've travelled to Invercargill to meet councillor Caroline Liu to find out if that's actually the case and hear how she thinks the government can best support the region. Caroline's Loss and Grief Centre provides mental health counselling.
The centre came about because we went through our own personal tragedy with our daughter Sarah dying, and I went through some really deep, significant grief and went looking for help. And a lot of the help that was offered was at quite a clinical level, and I knew I didn't need that. I needed someone I could talk to. And so through a process of 4 or 5 years, this idea was birthed from the community that this is what would make a difference. And for me, I knew it would make a difference.
Obviously people have made a conscious decision to come here and to speak to you and to open up. But at the same time, do you find that Southlanders can find it difficult talking about their emotions and feelings?
Yeah, lots of people said to me before we started this, nobody will come. But I knew that I would have. I might have walked up and down the street maybe 10 times before I got the confidence to come in, but I knew that at the breaking point that I was at, I needed someone to talk to who understood. So although that might be what people say, that's actually not my reality and it's not what we've experienced here. In the first few weeks, I could not believe how many people came through the door. Some people were just being nosy, which was fine, but people were like they had waited and they'd bottled stuff up for years. And they came in, they had a 45-minute conversation and they went out and things were better. This year alone, we've had over 2,000 requests for support or inquiries or people walk through the door.
Caroline introduced us to Lindsay Wright, a 4th-generation farmer who now works for Southland Rural Support. After 24 years running a farm, Lindsay gave it up during a painful period of his life.
All of a sudden in 2001-2, everything just came really, really good. It was sweet. Prices of lamb had gone up. You know, good lambs were getting close to $100 a lamb, and it was just the best job ever. And what I hadn't realised, it was just that the prices had got way above the average gain line for prices. And within 4 years, I found myself sitting in my truck in a black hole in the middle of my paddock, wondering what on earth to do, because the prices started coming back and back and back. And as well as that, I had kids going to high school and things like that, and I just couldn't make ends meet. That day that I came to a stop in the middle of the paddock, I just knew I had to talk to somebody about it. So I ended up ringing a counsellor and got an appointment. Fortunately, I managed to get in the next day. And just because I'd done that, I kind of felt that I was back in control because I was doing something about it. I walked into that counselling room, sat down, feeling pretty clever about what I was doing, and the counsellor just said to me, "So you got some problems?" And I said, and that's as far as I got. I didn't even get the yes out, and I just broke, because that was the first time ever I'd said to anybody, "I've got some problems that I just don't know how to deal with."
Zach, Lindsay and Caroline all talk about encouraging people to open up and making sure there's someone to listen. So, has the government listened this year, and what does Caroline hope it's heard?
From a policy level, a government that understands that mental health is an ongoing priority and it's not a short-term fix. So to make sure there are parameters that don't just think that after a year we would have solved all the problems. On a logistical, down on earth, here with me level, I think all the early intervention services like the Southern Rural Trust, like us, that actually have to work hard to seek for funding, should be given some injection of funding.
And what is hoped will be a new turmoil-free era has been ushered in for the national women's football team. Well-travelled and impressively credentialed Scotsman Tom Somani has today been announced as the new head coach of the Football Ferns. Somani succeeds Andreas Huraf, who resigned in July before an independent review substantiated complaints from 13 players about the negative environment he created in the Football Ferns. Sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me now to discuss his appointment. Hi Clay. It has obviously been a pretty rough patch for the Football Ferns of late, so what do we know about the new coach and what can we expect from him?
Well, a brief rundown. He's a Scotsman, as you mentioned there. He's 64 years old, so he's had a lot of experience as a coach. He's a former pro player actually, and he actually spent a season playing in New Zealand in 1977 for Christchurch, so an interesting note. He started out coaching men, but he's quickly moved to women. He's most well known for 2 stints with Australia, who are one of the leading women teams, but also with the United States, who are 3-time world champions, I think 4-time Olympic champions. So he's got a pretty impressive resume. He's renowned as a fairly laid-back character, and when we spoke to him today, the media on the phone, he certainly came across like that. He's also known for being big on team culture, and this is an important point because obviously this is what's been the big issue for the Football Ferns of late. I actually asked him today about his coaching style, and I guess this is what he had to say about what he likes to do with the team.
I'm not a dictator. I'm not somebody that, screams and shouts and the tonsils come out the throat and the sideline. I'm a guy who tries to bring people together. I try to work cooperatively and try and make everything work from there. And I've always done that throughout my career. And that's kind of who I am.
I guess as you can tell from that, he comes across as quite a different character to Taraf. He was seen as quite a forthright, this is how it's done, my way or the highway type character. He also has another good grasp on another area where Huraf was also seen to be lacking in, and that's an understanding of, I guess, the Kiwi sporting psyche, what drives Kiwis in sport and what Kiwis are all about when it comes to sport. Obviously playing here, coaching in Australia, during his time just coaching in general, he's picked up that you need to adapt to different cultures. And he said he's been in countries where coaches haven't done that and things have gone really badly. So, he said, I think he said a very important thing. He said he knows what New Zealanders are all about. So he said this team will definitely be a team that New Zealanders can be proud of and plays a New Zealand style.
So when does he start? And his immediate priorities, I mean, some of which will be turning towards the World Cup in France next year. He hasn't got much time, has he?
No, he's got to turn things around pretty quickly, I guess. He's got to name a team next week for the Oceania Nations Cup. Now, this is next month, this tournament, and it's important because this is where the football ferns qualify for next year's World Cup. So I think they've won every one of these tournaments to qualify for the Women's World Cup, so they definitely go in favourites, but there's a bit of work to do, obviously, for him coming in. If they can qualify for that, then, yeah, like you say, looking forward to the World Cup in France, June and July. So he's got less than 12 months to prepare a team. But certainly the football ferns are ranked inside the top 20 in the world. So if he lives up to his credentials, then we could see success for the ferns at the World Cup.
OK, let's move in a totally different direction. Domestic rugby competition, the finals on this weekend, Saturday night. Fans can go to the Premiership final, Auckland and Canterbury, for free. Why? Have they had stinker audiences in recent times, or why are they encouraging people in this way?
Well, I guess sporting audiences in New Zealand are struggling in recent years anyway, but it's actually a great idea. I mean, I'm not sure how much money they stand to lose from it. It's probably not that much when you put it up against the gesture, and it was going to be very interesting to see how many people they get there.
What is the normal crowd, do you reckon?
Well, I would say several thousand would be a good estimate. You talk about a final like this, it's Auckland-Canterbury, obviously, so a big rivalry, and Auckland have, of course, been pretty average for a number of years and have just been brilliant this year under their new coach Alama Iramia. So it will be very interesting to see how many they get in the stands. They're also going to let the fans, the kids, on the field at the end of the game, which is another great concept. So there's certainly some great signs in Auckland rugby. They're driving things. Even in the media, we're hearing about the way the players are dealing with the media and just how things are being handled. So the idea to let people come into the game for free, it's a brilliant one as far as I can tell.
And before you head off, Championship Division decided tonight, Waikato Otago. What can we expect and what's on the line in this match?
Well, what's on the line is promotion to the Premiership Division. So certainly plenty on the line for these teams, and also Otago actually beat Waikato recently to take the Renfrew Shield off them. So there's a bit of a revenge to be had there. So I guess we'll see. Waikato at home and have been the form team in that division this year, so they'll go in favourites. But it should be a close game.
Thanks, Clay. Appreciate you joining us. Have a great weekend. Turning now to St John ambulance officers in Christchurch. Now, they say they are being attacked more and more and have a simple message. Please stop. It comes as a bad batch of synthetics continues to wreak havoc in Christchurch, with 1 or 2 affected people still coming into Christchurch Hospital each day. It's proving extra challenging for St John staff, who are finding themselves busier and in increasingly violent situations. Now, we wanted to see firsthand exactly what frontline paramedics have to deal with. Our South Island video journalist Logan Church spent a Saturday night 12-hour shift with an ambulance crew.
It's 7 o'clock on a sunny Saturday evening, and the Christchurch Metro St John night shift is just getting underway. There are 6 ambulances on the road tonight. I'm in Christchurch 3-5 with emergency medical technician Lucy and intensive care paramedic intern Troy. Our first job, we're racing west. A middle-aged woman is reported to be having some kind of breakdown. Arriving at the house, Lucy and Troy head down the driveway to figure out what's going on.
So we've gone to this patient and we've gone inside, well, just knocked on the door, however nobody's answered the door, so we've called up the police to get them to come. We do know that somebody is in there. They've mostly gone to the toilet but not answering the door to us.
So now it's just waiting for the police to turn up?
Pretty much, yeah, hopefully they open the door to us soon.
But before the police arrive, the woman emerges, stumbling in tears. A friend is helping her into the ambulance. She isn't well at all.
So now we're just checking her out, doing her blood pressure, checking all vitals, see how everything's going.
Blood pressure's just going down now, okay?
Turn down that radio.
I did forget your wine, I know, I'm very mean. I think 4 bottles was more than enough. Wasn't much left in there anyways, it wouldn't have done too much, okay?
Mental health is a big problem in Christchurch. Combine that with alcohol and drugs, as this woman has, and you have a potentially deadly mix.
Just going to steal a small drop of blood from your finger to check your blood sugar levels. Okay, make sure that your blood sugars are all good.
We're taking her straight to hospital. When you dial 111 and ask for St John in the South Island, your call will likely end up here, in the call centre at the new Justice Precinct. About a dozen staff sitting at desks are busy answering phones. The police and fire equivalents are next door. One of the dispatchers, Emily Louise Cooper, explained how her job works.
At the moment I'm dispatching ambulances and we also take calls. Will behind us at the moment is taking 111s and I dispatch at the moment the southern area.
And what would a typical day look like?
There's no typical day in here, but we call back-to-back calls, very little. I'm going to have to... Won't anyone go ahead?
Things can get busy. Back out on the road, a couple of hours into our shift, the Spotify is plugged in and we settle into what is expected to be a busy night.
Oh, yeah, good song, good song.
Soon we're racing south. A man has been stabbed.
We've got a 20-year-old male who has accidentally grabbed a knife and stabbed himself in the abdomen. Apparently it happened while he was cooking. So, not entirely sure if it was accidental or not, but we'll go and have a wee look.
St John uses a colour system to grade the seriousness of a job. A stabbing like this is status red, the second highest colour, and means their life or one of their limbs are at risk. After assessing the patient...
It looks like it's been accidental. Looks like he's had a knife on the countertop and he's sort of walked into it like that. So he's had a just about the belly button and his central abdomen. He's got a bit of a stab wound, approximately, I'd say about that much has gone into his abdomen of the knife. So take him up to hospital. But he's walking and talking, looking good, and it's not bleeding anymore.
This man is also dropped off at ED. It's a hard, tough job that Troy and Lucy do. 4 days or nights on, 4 off. Over their half-hour dinner break, Troy and Lucy told me what they believed people's biggest misconceptions about their job were.
That we're a taxi service?
Yeah.
And that we're just ambulance drivers and don't know too much about medicine. But, you know, myself, I've done 6 years of medicine, studying medicine. So we get quite proficient in it, and Lucy's done a fair few years herself as well.
Yeah, it's just, you know, we're an emergency service.
And both Troy and Lucy say violence towards them is becoming a common occurrence. In 2017, just over 2,500 AMBO crew abuse incidents were reported across New Zealand. Just over 600 of those were physical. In the first 3 months of 2018, more than 530 crew abuse incidents were reported. Lucy has a stern message for those who have or intend to do them harm.
Hands off us, don't touch us, don't abuse us. Most of us are over the way that we're getting treated. It's happening more and more frequently and it's not on, absolutely over it. So hands off us.
And not long after, about midnight, we saw that firsthand. A 111 call came in. A man in his 50s had fallen through a ceiling. He had been drinking solidly. He was quickly wheeled into the back of the ambulance. It became apparent that this is very serious.
Excellent. Just relax back.
He's drifting in and out of consciousness. The man is flailing around on the stretcher. Troy gives him a sedative. Given he has a serious head wound, he likely doesn't even know what he's doing.
But we need to leave now as well.
No, fair enough. I'll come.
Sweet. Alright, here's the keys. Thank you. No worries. Alrighty, we'll start making drinks. Alright, sorry, we'll stop the chit chat, we'll go. Thank you.
We are now speeding towards hospital.
So, just been to a male who has fallen through the ceiling, approximately 3.5 metres high.
That fall has caused big problems. A big bump on his head, his jugular vein is not looking good, and he has suffered a brain injury. And that's only the worst of it. Arriving at hospital, his life hangs in the balance. As the end of the 12-hour shift draws near and the sun rises, we're heading back to hospital so Lucy and Troy can check on the patient who fell through the ceiling. He's now in ICU. If he survives, he will have a long recovery. For Ambo staff, checking in on their patients can give them a sense of closure. They have to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death, and that's not a responsibility they carry lightly. As 7 o'clock Sunday morning rolls around, I ask Troy to sum up the evening.
The night's gone all right. You know, it's obviously being a Saturday night. It has its thrills and spills, probably being alcohol related for all the jobs that we've had tonight. Pretty much the typical Friday, Saturday night stuff that we're seeing quite commonly nowadays.
We pull up to St John's Ambulance Hub, where this ambulance will be cleaned by a team of professionals and restocked. For me, I'm off to bed. But for Troy and Lucy, in 12 hours' time, they will be back here to do it all again. Kei o te tahi ahau mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Logan Church tēnei.
To some of your feedback now, and a story we had earlier in the program about Gladstone Primary School. Mrs O, the teacher, one of the teachers there, was teaching 2 classes today, 40 students, 5 and 6 years old, because they couldn't get a relief teacher. This from Greg. I'm in my 50s, grew up in Fielding. I remember my 1970 Standard 1 class, he says, 38 children for the whole year. It was pretty normal at the time, he recalls. In 1975, his Form 2 year, there were 2 classes being taught in the Assembly Hall with just a divider between them.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten-aho. An investigation is underway after a barbecue gas bottle exploded at De La Salle College in Auckland, injuring several students and teachers. Middlemore Hospital says 3 students and 2 teachers are stable, but one may have to be admitted. Katie Doyle reports.
The principal of De La Salle, Miles Hoggerty, says the 3 students were running a sausage sizzle as part of a school project. He says a small gas canister malfunctioned, causing it to explode. Mr Hoggerty says the students and staff were treated by the Mangere College's medical team before emergency services arrived. Support is being offered to the students and staff affected. WorkSafe is investigating. This is Katie Doyle.
The police say officers have been deeply troubled by the knowledge a man they pulled over at a checkpoint went on to kill, but there's no way they could have known what he was about to do. A 55-year-old man who laid in wait for his victim has pleaded guilty to murdering 27-year-old Christchurch woman Nicole Tuxford at her Maryvale home in April. Detective Inspector Daryl Sweeney says her killer, who has name suppression, broke in and waited overnight for her to return before murdering her. He says the man was found to be over the legal alcohol limit and had his car keys taken from him just hours before the killing. But the man caught a taxi from the checkpoint and headed straight for Ms Tuxford's home. Home care support workers say they're being forced to dip into their own pockets to service clients. In a settlement in 2016, the government committed to reviewing travel rates every year. But despite rising fuel prices and 2 government reviews, travel rates haven't budged. Support workers have told Checkpoint that the system is failing them, and with rising fuel prices, the industry is in crisis.
It's not enough. It's not enough. I, on a Wednesday, do 54.2k, but I only get paid 33.3k. So I'm subsidising 20.9k out of my own pocket. It doesn't make sense.
A worker speaking anonymously. The Justice Minister Andrew Little expects opposition to the Law Commission's proposed abortion changes. 3 health models have been recommended by the Law Commission, all of which would decriminalise abortion. They include no mental health assessment, just 1 health practitioner making this assessment instead of 2, or requiring the test only after 22 weeks of pregnancy. Mr Little will take a paper to the Cabinet next year to consult government partners before drafting a bill.
When you start looking at changing, particularly the sort of changes that the Law Commission has talked about in its report, of course there's going to be a reaction. That should not dissuade us, however, ever from having a public debate.
Andrew Little's preference is for a medical assessment in later stage abortions. Police bomb squads and federal officials have searched a postal sorting facility in the US state of Florida as part of the investigation into a series of pipe bomb packages. A total of 10 potentially explosive parcels have now been intercepted. They've targeted high-profile Democrats and critics of the President, Donald Trump. The former Vice President, Joe Biden, who was one of those targeted, says it could serve as a sobering wake-up call.
My hope is this recent spat of who knows exactly what they were, but these pipe bombs being mailed might wake everybody in my business up a little bit and realize that we have to begin to put this country back together again.
Former US Vice President Joe Biden. More than 100 Year 13 Mount Albert Grammar students have marched to their school this afternoon, claiming they were banned from their last day to avoid pranks. In an email to parents last night, the school said Year 13 students have been granted study leave today. The principal, Patrick Drum, says the decision wasn't made to avoid pranks, but students disagree and stormed onto the school grounds in protest. Mount Albert Grammar student Hannah Zwalue says the school's decision upset many of her classmates. One of the 300 striking court staff in the South Island says they were driven to taking action by a lack of movement on their pay claim. Courts across the South Island closed unexpectedly this afternoon after a wildcat strike by PSA members. Courts in Waikato also closed after 45 union members walked out. A Christchurch Union delegate, Mark Williamson, says the action is in support of a claim for a 4% pay rise over 2 years, with the Ministry of Justice only willing to offer 2% over 2 years.
We've been in collective negotiations with the Ministry since May, and we've been trying to secure a fair deal for our members, given that we are second to lowest in the pay table for the public service.
Mark Williamson says part of their claim is around narrowing the gender pay gap. It's 6:05. Sport. The New Zealand football are confident the new national women's coach Tom Sermanni can build a strong, healthy culture within the squad. Sermanni has been confirmed as the successor to Andreas Heref, who resigned in July before the release of a review which revealed he had bullied players. The 64-year-old Scotsman has coached the Australian and US women's national teams, and New Zealand football's Andy Boyan says Sermanni stood out for one reason.
Where Tom stands out is he's a really good fit for us from a cultural perspective, we believe. So we think he's going to be able to come in and work with the group of players right away and start to move us towards where we want to be.
New Zealand football's Andy Boyans. An organisation representing top athletes says the leak by former Olympic champion Hamish Carter that exposed anonymous feedback on former national track cycling coach Anthony Peden is indicative of wider problems in the sport. Carter has resigned from High Performance Sport New Zealand after admitting he leaked information given to him in cycling's review of the Rio Olympics. A recent review identified a culture of bullying and lack of accountability, and the chair of the Athletes Federation, Rob Nicol, says the Carter situation only underscores that.
I have respect for Hamish. He made a mistake, he's let people down, and he's acknowledged that, and he stood aside. The thing I struggle with is that the environment in cycling has been that way for some time, and I wonder, what role have the board and senior management played, and, are they the right people to sort the situation out?
Athletes Federation Chairperson Rob Nicol. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, American democracy is under threat from computerised elections, says Dr. Jonathan Simon. We get that there was a big bang, but now the universe seems quite stable, really. How did that happen? Professor Anthony Aguirre explains. And royal watcher Penny Junor on the Queen's corgis. A book that will cause a lot less ruckus than some of the earlier ones. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Fine spells and isolated showers. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumaranui, Taihape and Wairarapa. Fine spells today, rain developing tomorrow morning or afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods with scattered rain developing in Hawke's Bay tomorrow night. For Nelson and Marlborough, fine spells, a period of rain tomorrow afternoon. Canterbury, mainly fine, but areas of low cloud about the coast tomorrow morning. For Buller, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and isolated showers, rain in Fiordland tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine spells today with scattered showers this afternoon and evening. Cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain. And for the Chatham Islands, showers today becoming fine tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. More now on the primary teachers and their pay talks. The teachers say the Education Ministry's pay offer doesn't even come close to what they need as they prepare to go on a rolling week-long strike next month. Teachers have voted overwhelmingly to go on strike in an effort to get smaller class sizes, more resources and significant pay rises. Matt Chatterton reports.
Hannah, an Auckland primary school teacher, has been in the profession for 6 years. Her partner is a secondary school teacher. She says they want to have a family one day, but struggle to see how that will happen.
We don't have any children currently or own a house, so we're able to rent and I feel like we're pretty comfortable. But if we wanted to buy a house, we can't. It's not an option. It's not even close to being an option for us.
Hannah says the latest pay offer of a 9% increase over the next 3 years falls far short of what teachers need. She says the perception of teaching is not what it used to be.
Overall, I think it has been undervalued, and I think that a lot of smart, well-educated people are not choosing it as an option because other things are valued more.
Hannah says strike action feels like the only way to make the government truly understand what teachers need, which is more teachers. Education Minister Chris Hipkins says he's not surprised by the teachers' decision to strike.
So I understand they want a lot more and they want it as soon as possible, but government has to balance all of the things up. We've got to make sure that we're delivering things in a sustainable way. One of the things that teachers are asking for example, is more teachers, and it's difficult to deliver more teachers when we're struggling to fill the teaching positions that we've got now.
Mr Hipkins won't say whether the government has more money available for teachers as the union and the government prepare for urgent bargaining with the Employment Relations Authority tomorrow. He does say, however, that it's not just a case of dipping into the government's $5.5 billion surplus.
You can't spend the same money over and over and over again, so we have to consider what's going to be sustainable in the long term.
The minister says he hopes parents caught out by the upcoming strikes understand the reasons for them and that both parties want to find a resolution. Parents also seem to be understanding of the teachers' need to strike.
I'd be supportive of the strike, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've got to have good quality education for our children and students, and yeah, if there's underfunding for the education sector, then yeah, I think it's positive.
I'm supportive. I think the teachers do a great job and they have legitimate concerns. For me, it's a small inconvenience for a bigger purpose. I can bring my son to work if I need to.
What I've heard suggests that teachers don't really earn a lot, so I can understand that they feel aggrieved. However, the strike also seems a bit opportunistic a couple of weeks before Christmas.
If the mediation between the Teachers' Union, the Education Ministry and the Employment Relations Authority fails to reach an agreement, the strikes will begin on November the 12th in the Auckland region and continue across the country for a week. For Checkpoint, Matt Chatterton.
Justice Minister Andrew Little says he expects to take a paper to Cabinet early next year with 3 proposed options for decriminalising abortion. These 3 alternative models have been proposed by the Law Commission to deal with abortion: a woman needing no assessment of her mental and physical health to have an abortion, one health practitioner making an assessment, or a test only after 22 weeks of pregnancy. Andrew Little's personal preference is for a test only in later stage abortions, given that most take place in the first trimester. He spoke to political reporter Joe Moyer.
The debate is about not only, should this be seen as a health matter, but in the end, it is a matter for women and their health professional, and for women to make the decision. Once you start putting in what we have at the moment with going to certifying consultants, is that you're effectively taking the decisions out of the hands of women. There's no other health procedure that would allow that to happen. So there is that. And most abortions, at least in New Zealand, happen in the early stages of pregnancy. If not in the first trimester, then shortly after.
Is this a real win for you in terms of finding a way forward for women in New Zealand?
I think we've suffered for too long this situation where issues are deemed to be kind of too difficult or too problematic politically for political parties. And I'm very proud to be part of a government led by a Prime Minister who says that doesn't matter how hard the issue is. If there is a genuine need to review, the current state of things, let's do it, and let's not be timid and discourage public debate on what are important issues.
What sort of, kickback are you expecting from these recommendations from those who are pro-life?
We know that abortion is a hugely controversial issue. It has been here, it has been in other countries. When you start looking at changing, particularly the sort of changes that the Law Commission has talked about in its report, of course there's going to be a reaction. That should not dissuade us, however, ever from having a public debate.
And what sort of a timeline can we expect on sort of some decisions and seeing some legislation?
Cabinet's got a very full agenda right down to the end of this year, so it's unlikely I'm going to get something up to Cabinet before the end of the year. But I would expect, subject to discussions with others, that a paper will go to Cabinet in the early part of next year, and a draft bill will go to Parliament at some point, and we'll see where it gets to after that.
I guess that timeline means that we're going to fall behind Ireland on this then, aren't we?
Well, it's a state like Queensland has made a law change recently. Ireland voted for their constitutional change recently, so these things are happening around us. But this is a government that is a year old. It's taken time to get a bit of homework done on the issue, and we've got to do this at a pace that fits our political circumstance.
Justice Minister Andrew Little there speaking to our political reporter Joe Moyer. A woman living in Mangere who spends $200 a week on petrol taking her grandchildren to school in Manurewa is one of thousands of people boycotting fuel stations today. Nearly 40,000 people have responded to a nationwide Facebook event about boycotting all petrol stations because of their high fuel prices. Our reporter Jessie Chang and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
And Tahi Tahi is teaching her grandchildren how to make white sauce at home. It's a Friday and they should all be at school, but there was little fuel in the car this morning when they woke up, and school wasn't an important enough reason to break the boycott.
Well, to be quite honest, I never used to really think about it. You just did it like everybody else. You just turn off and just keep getting petrol because you need it. You have to have it. And then I think it's once we moved to Mangere here from Manurewa that we really appreciate it even more, because we have to take our kids to school every day in Manurewa because they prefer to go there to school. They started there a few years ago and they want to finish off their schooling there. So it's become a bit of a mission with the cost of petrol. So it's getting on my nerves.
Yeah, I mean, how much are you spending on petrol a week?
We're spending about 200, maybe plus. Depends on different situations, whether a kid has forgotten their lunch or anything, those sort of things. But yeah, about 200 a week on gas just to get from Mangere. We have to go to Mangere, drop off, 1, 2, 3, 4 different schools, drop off at the 4 different schools down there, and then come back out here, do housework, do what you need, do my online stuff, and then back in the afternoon.
Ms Tahi Tahi's granddaughter, Reipai, says the boycott is important and fuel prices need to come down.
Because we travel very far, especially from where we're living now, and I'm going to a school for high school next year, going to a school in Manurewa because I don't want to go to a school in Mangere, and so it'd be even further, so the cost is really high at the moment.
And Tahi Tahi looks after 11 children. Most of them are her grandchildren, but she also cares for some of her nieces and nephews.
Some of the kids that have come from, say, my siblings who haven't got along with their parents, and, the kids have just rocked up at 12 years old, knocked on the door. Auntie, can I live with you? I'm like, oh, what's happened? Well, I'm not getting on with Dad. I'll go, okay, come in. And those sort of things, it's about whānau and it's about taking care of them when they need to be. Yep, and mostly it's my own grandchildren because a couple of my children have been in trouble and it's got to do with drugs.
She says if she wasn't paying so much for petrol, she would have money for other things.
We're not able to get shoes when the kids need them. We have to put it off until the holes in the shoe grow too big to keep packing with cardboard and plastic, you know, so that's how it has to be.
A family bereavement earlier this year forced Ms Tahitahi to give up work. She says now, after all the bills are paid, she has between $260 to $320 for food. And that means Ms Tahitahi has to be creative with meals.
They have to finish off last week's, okay, so there's not much in there, but they've got to finish it off right down to, and whatever the crumbs are left in the bottom, we make the Weet-Bix biscuits. And that's next week, Weet-Bix, which somebody opened this morning to get the cards out of and got ripped up. And so we have the dolmios for the mince, we have the pastas and rice, and lots of bread, you know, you can't go without, it's a staple bread.
And Tahitahi says since the government implemented the regional fuel tax for Auckland, the family has been struggling. She says she's behind any action to get fuel prices down. For Checkpoint, Kōjisi Chang Tēnei.
More than 100 Year 13 Mount Albert Grammar students marched to their school today, claiming they were banned from their last day to avoid pranks. In an email sent to parents last night, the Auckland school said instead of attending their final day, Year 13 students had been granted study leave. The principal, Patrick Drum, says the decision wasn't made to avoid pranks. However, students disagree and stormed onto the grounds in protest. Our reporter, Katie Scotcher, was there.
Year 13s at Mount Albert Grammar School were expecting to go to school for their final classes today. But at the 11th hour, they discovered this wouldn't happen.
Yesterday, we were called into assembly at 2:30 p.m. and we were told that we have today off as study leave and that we were going to be treated as adults.
That's Hannah Zwalaway. She had originally organised a picnic for her classmates to celebrate their last day of class at a nearby park. But that quickly turned into a protest. More than 100 students marched onto the Mount Albert Grammar School grounds this afternoon, claiming their last day was cancelled to avoid pranks. Hannah says that upset many of her classmates.
Lots of people were very upset. I know quite a few people were crying. There was a lot of anger as well. People were very mad about it.
Hannah says celebrating the final day of high school is a rite of passage.
Every single adult seems to remember their last day of school very fondly and they have very great memories of it, and we don't have that at all.
Fellow Year 13 student Ruben Cato says the move shows the school doesn't trust its students.
They're saying 1 minute, we trust you guys are so great, and then next minute saying, oh, by the way, we actually don't trust you in the slightest.
Another student, Theodore Haringa, was one of those who stormed onto the school grounds.
They're just trying to save face and keep up the good image of the school at the cost of the student experience.
Mount Albert Grammar headmaster Patrick Drum was nowhere to be seen as the students flooded onto the grounds. But earlier he said students weren't banned to avoid pranks.
I wasn't aware of any pranks planned, but certainly that may have been a possibility, but we've just sort of taken that out of the equation and said, sending a strong message that our primary concern for them is finishing the year strongly and positively.
Patrick Drum says today isn't the 450 students' last day at school.
Their final day is actually on Monday. That always has been. That is also their prize giving it on Monday afternoon here at school for them and their families. And then we go on to another major event, which almost all of the Year 13s will be attending, which is their Leavers Dinner on Monday night.
It may not have been the final day of classes the Mount Albert Grammar students were expecting, but the protest at least may have been the rite of passage they were after. I tamaki makoto mō te hōtaka o te yahiahi nei, ko Katie Scotcher aho.
Overseas now, a vigil has been held outside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to demand full justice for the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was killed after entering the building 3 weeks ago. The Washington Post columnist was a critic of Saudi Arabia's leadership. The details of exactly what happened inside the consulate remain a mystery. Saudi officials initially denied having anything to do with Mr Khashoggi's disappearance, but later said he was accidentally killed in a botched operation to return him to the kingdom. Now Saudi Arabia's public prosecutor says the murder was premeditated. The BBC's Mark Lowen was at the vigil and sent this report.
Here at the spot where Jamal Khashoggi was last seen more than 3 weeks ago entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, friends of the murdered journalist are holding a vigil, demanding answers. They know the news cycle moves on, that political deals might sweep this case under the carpet. But gripping candles and posters bearing his face, they're determined to keep the pressure on the Saudi authorities. Professor Amr Darag is one of the speakers.
We clearly state that we do not and will not accept compromises in the case of his murder, and that we will not keep silent on any attempt to evade any criminal from accountability and punishment. We will follow all legitimate means to achieve full justice for Jamal.
Ratcheting up that pressure on Riyadh is the report today that the Turkish government has played Gina Haspel, the CIA director, what are said to be the recordings from inside the consulate that chronicle the murder. The big question is whether this is the smoking gun and if a direct line can be traced to the top levels of the Saudi state. President Trump is being briefed by Ms. Haspel. In Riyadh, the Saudi public prosecutor has said that based on the evidence provided by Turkey, the murder was premeditated. That's a big shift from the initial denial and spurious claims of accidental death after a fistfight. But the question remains on whose orders the hit squad operated and who in Saudi Arabia will be seen as above the law.
And that was Mark Lowen there from Istanbul. Now, a lot of you are getting in contact about a situation in New Plymouth. There is billowing smoke over part of the city. I've got a statement here from the New Zealand Police saying it is a large grass fire. They are asking members of the public to please avoid the Centennial Drive area as the police are trying to help the fire service and other emergency services with that grass fire. They were called to the scene just before 5 o'clock. The road is cordoned off and traffic is being diverted there, so avoid it at all costs if you can. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will touch down in Rotorua next week, with the thermal city proving a popular stop for the royal family for almost a century. And the local iwi, Te Arawa, will be on hand to roll out the welcome mat for the royals' latest power couple. Te Mana Korahi reporter John Boynton went to Rotorua to see what is in store for them.
The British royal family has been visiting Rotorua to tumultuous welcomes since 1920, when the Prince of Wales travelled by train from Auckland to inspect the famous geysers at Whakarewarewa. And thousands turned out to see Queen Elizabeth in 1954.
Your Gracious Majesty, on behalf of the Maori people, may I clothe you with this cloak, a sign of chieftainship of the highest order.
And there was even a valiant attempt at te reo by the broadcasters of the time.
Haere, haere, haere. That cry of welcome went up again and again from Arawa Park this afternoon. The greeting of the Maori people to their Queen.
Back in 1954, the loyal crowd started gathering in Rotorua days before the Queen's arrival.
Since early morning, the representatives of this proud and intensely loyal race have been arriving in their thousands in buses, cars and trucks. They have come from their homes throughout the Bay of Plenty, and they have come from at least 15 Maori pars or communal settlements in which they have been accommodated for the past 2 or 3 days round about the Rotorua district.
Te Arawa leader Sir Toby Curtis says tangata whenua probably won't be gathering days beforehand when the Duke and Duchess of Sussex make their royal way to Rotorua next Wednesday. But he says Harry and Meghan can expect the warmest of welcomes.
We want to go out of our way to make it as wonderful and as splendid a day for them as possible.
At Government Gardens in Rotorua, the scene of many royal welcomes, Margaret Benton and Michelle Bullpin are out on the greens, croquet mallets in hand. And Miss Benton is excited at the prospect of catching a glimpse of the latest royal glamour couple.
I think it's wonderful. It gives people a bit of excitement. I remember the Queen coming here. My daughter was a guide and the Queen stopped and talked to her. It was how many years ago? 48 years or something ago. What did she say? Probably, do you like being a guide? Or I was a girl guide too.
Margaret Benton's hoping the royals might even be up for a game of croquet.
So I may be able to give them a croquet mallet and say, right, see if you can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Bet he'd have a go too. And so would she, by the looks of it.
But croquet's not on the official royal agenda for Rotorua. The royal couple will visit the National Kiwi Hatchery at Rainbow Springs and meet some real-life Kiwis during a walkabout at government gardens. Then it's off to the Redwoods Tree Walk, where they'll meet local mountain biking representatives. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko John Boynton aho.
And let's get to some of your feedback now, lots of it coming in. We told the story this evening about a teacher at Gladstone Primary here in Auckland. They couldn't get a relief teacher today, so she was, well, in charge of 40 kids, normally has a class of about 24. This afternoon, my son starts school in the new year. The principal told me of the 4 new entrance teachers, there will be 2 to 3 of them who haven't yet graduated. They chose the school over several more lucrative offers from overseas and private schools. Apparently, this person says, principals are offering jobs over the phone without even meeting people because there just aren't enough teachers applying. On the issue of home care support workers payments, now these workers are being heavily affected by the price of fuel because they're paid, they drive from one home to the next when they're caring for people. This person says the format for guaranteed hours needs to be simplified. It just does not work. Car maintenance, mobile phones, etc., are all at our own cost. I believe I really make a difference in the day-to-day lives of the people in my community, and that is so satisfying. However, our conditions of work need to improve so support workers continue to provide the care for our vulnerable people. That's from Carmel, who also says that they're paid for the work on their roster. If they work more hours than their rostered time, they don't get extra pay. They can try and get it back and justify the extra time that they've used, but often they are not listened to, Carmel says. That is all we have time for tonight on Checkpoint. Thank you for joining us this evening, whether you listened on radio or watched us on TV. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. From all the team on Checkpoint, good evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister won't say which of the 3 proposed models for decriminalising abortion she prefers. Home care support workers say they're being forced to dip into their own pockets to pay for their travel to visit clients. An investigation is underway into an exploding barbecue gas bottle at De La Salle College in Auckland, which injured several students and teachers. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are to fly to Sydney this afternoon, while they'll attend the Invictus Games closing ceremony tomorrow before departing for New Zealand. Our next news and weather is at 7.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen Hay.
It's a time of deep divisions,
including the latest national and international news from the RNZ News team.
Any reputational damage Mr Craig suffered resulted almost entirely from his own actions.
And always